Okay, welcome everyone. It'll take a few moments here for Zoom to let people in from the waiting room. So thank you so much for joining us this evening to learn about the Environmental Justice Action Plan. We'll get started in just a moment here, but what we invite you to do is while people are still entering, to get to know each other a little bit better, you can share what community you live in and what is or are the most concerning environmental problems that you see in your neighborhood. So we're going to be having a conversation tonight about some of the challenges that we face across Mecklenburg County and how this plan will help to equitably address those concerns. So we really want to hear from all of you about the challenges that you're facing. And as you share those, I'll read a few of them. I'll go ahead and say hi. I'm Meg Fencil. I'm the Director of Engagement and Impact at Sustain Charlotte. We are an organization that advocates for sustainable land use and transportation choices. So this is a really interesting topic for us because we know that the more that we have to depend on driving to get where we need to go across the county and across the region, that really has impacts on our air quality, our water quality, even our tree canopy as we spread out more and consume a lot of our remaining forests. And of course, even at a larger level, we'll also talk about a bit about climate change impacts. And we know that those impacts do not affect all people equally. People in communities of color, people living in low-income communities, older adults, children are often really disproportionately impacted by environmental problems. So I don't see anything yet in the chat, so we'll keep an eye on that and take a look at the chat so you can see what your fellow attendees are sharing. So we're going to go ahead and get started here. So if we go to the next slide, Alina. So today we're having a conversation about Mecklenburg County's Environmental Justice Action Plan, and I'll introduce our three amazing speakers in just a moment. But first, want to just run through a few logistics. So if you go to the next slide there, Alina, we will have a question and answer session at the end of the event. So if you have questions throughout the event, please put those into the Q&A section. And I think we had a little trouble with the chat, but we're gonna see if we can get that enabled. And we'll answer as many questions as we have time to get to, but all the questions that you ask in the Q&A will be saved, so we can share those with our speakers if we don't have time to address all of them today. So if we go to the next slide there. Just a few announcements. Sustain Charlotte is really excited to invite you to our Impact 704 Academy. This is an in-person event series. You can come to one event or two events. We really encourage you to come to all three and earn your Academy certificate. And this is really about equipping you to help to shape our future in Mecklenburg County. We want to make sure that everyone has the knowledge and the skills and the relationships to be an effective advocate for change. And these will be held on Thursdays in October, November, and December at Camp North End. And it's supported by Southminster, so we're able to provide this at no cost. And we're gonna have some type of yummy food there from one of the Camp North End vendors. So it's a great chance to not only learn about sustainability, but also to meet other people that are passionate about sustainability. And on the next slide here, we've got another great event opportunity. We are hosting an event series this year called Growing Our Greenways and Parks. And this is a partnership between Sustain Charlotte, Partners for Parks, and the Carolina Thread Trail. We're really trying to get Mecklenburg County's greenway system built fast. We know people love greenways, but we want to really be able to use them, not just for recreation within our neighborhoods. We want to be able to walk and ride bikes to really reach any part of the county without having to get into a car. So we are hosting these events to introduce folks to greenways that they may not be familiar with. The next one will be Saturday, October 8th at 2 p.m. on the Irwin and Stewart Creek Greenways. And we're going to be partnering with several neighborhood organizations, the Oaklawn Park Community Improvement Organization, the Lincoln Heights Neighborhood Association, and hopefully others that want to get involved. So Alina is going to be putting these links into the chat so you can check them out. She's also going to be sending a update email tomorrow that will have all the links that we share tonight. So just feel free to watch the webinar tonight, and you don't need to take notes of the links, at least. If there's anything interesting, of course, you're welcome to write that down. And our final announcement is we would love to see you on Sunday, October 30th for Biketoberfest. This is an urban adventure that benefits Sustain Charlotte, and it is designed to help you have the most fun you'll ever have on two wheels in Charlotte. So we are exploring neighborhoods, greenways, the rail trail, low traffic volume streets. It's an all ages, all abilities event, and you'll get to go check out local businesses and destinations and get stamps in your exclusive Biketoberfest passport, and then exchange those for a chance to win some fun raffle prizes at the end. We also have volunteer opportunities for Biketoberfest. So if you want to volunteer for a few hours, you'll get free participation in the event. So you can also bring your family and friends who haven't ridden a bike for a while. There's even a walking route. And last year we had over 600 people, so you might even meet some new friends. All right, so I see a comment in the chat. Chanel shared that her community is a food desert. So that is definitely a challenge. Andy shared, my community has lack of fresh food and they are expensive. So I'm seeing, issues of lack of access to food. So that could be not having grocery stores, that could be not having transportation access to fresh foods. So a lot of different environmental challenges are facing communities across Mecklenburg County. All right, well, we're going to get started with the programmatic part of our event now that we got some announcements out of the way. So if we go to the next slide. If you're really interested in helping to support transportation choices across our region and are passionate about helping people find ways to get around without a car, we have a transportation coalition that's facilitated by Sustain Charlotte. We have over 60 grassroots and neighborhood organizations that are members of that, working together to support transportation choices. So if you're interested in learning more or joining our next meeting next Tuesday, just send me an email and we'll get you hooked up with that. All right. And also, if you like these events and you want to see more of them, we invite you to become a member of Sustain Charlotte. We also have a partnership program for businesses and would love for you to be a part of that, either as an individual or your business, if that feels like a good fit. Okay. So we are sharing this slide because climate change is becoming real for North Carolina, and we know that some communities are affected more than others. We all contribute in different ways to the health and degradation of our environment, but those impacts are not borne proportionally. They are disproportionate. And if we are going to be serious about racial equity, we need to recognize and respond appropriately to those disproportionate impacts. Erin is going to share more about the Environmental Justice Action Plan, but I do want to share a bit about what Sustain Charlotte has done over the years to advocate for countywide sustainability planning. So since the time that we were founded back in 2010, we've been advocating for a countywide sustainability plan. So the Environmental Justice Action Plan is not identical to a sustainability plan, but it's a really important part of planning for an environmentally just future for all of our residents, and especially those who have been most impacted by past and current practices, programs, budgets. So back in 2013, after several years of advocacy by us and other organizations, things were looking pretty hopeful. The County Commission voted to support the creation of a countywide sustainability plan. But unfortunately, a few years later, there was inconsistent support for moving that plan forward at a countywide level. So we are really excited to see the work that's being done with our elected officials and residents really rallying behind the Environmental Leadership Action Plan and Environmental Justice Action Plan. So Erin will share more about the Environmental Justice Action Plan tonight, but I just want to thank all of you who have followed us throughout the years and have followed CleanAIRE NC and worked in neighborhoods to lead residents, as Ron Ross has done. Everybody together has really helped us to move this forward. And certainly there's a lot of work remaining to be done. So before we get started with our speakers, we'll just give you a little preview of what you're going to see tonight. So Erin will talk about what environmental justice is and why it's important. We'll talk about environmental challenges that communities in Charlotte and really across Mecklenburg County are facing, and what the county is doing to address environmental justice. And we always want to leave you with practical ways to get involved. So Erin will be sharing some of the upcoming public meetings and engagement opportunities that you can invite your friends, families, neighbors, colleagues to. And then we'll wrap up with a Q&A session. So it is time to introduce our speakers. So first we'll have Erin Stanforth. Erin is the Sustainability and Resiliency Manager with Mecklenburg County. Daisha Williams is the Environmental Justice Manager at CleanAIRE NC. And Ronald Ross is a resident, amazing advocate. He is part of the leadership of the Northwood Estates Community Organization and has been very instrumental in moving the historic West End Green District forward. So we're going to kick things off with Erin.
Thanks, Meg. I'm going to share my screen real quick. All right. Can you see my screen? Yeah. All right. Awesome. So hello, my name is Erin. I'm the Sustainability and Resiliency Manager for Mecklenburg County. I'm going to try to talk a little fast. I have a lot of slides, but feel free to ask any questions you have in the chat. As Meg mentioned, so we do have an Environmental Leadership Action Plan. In March of 2021, our Board of County Commissioners passed our updated environmental leadership policy, along with our environmental leadership action plan. So the purpose of the ELAP is to really be a roadmap to implement our sustainability goals that are covered in that policy. The ELAP is organized into 4 sections: facilities and fleet, operations, natural environment, and policies and partnerships. For the purposes of this discussion, we're going to be focused on the justice and racial equity subsection of the policies and partnerships section of the environmental leadership action plan. And so with that in mind, I'm going to kind of switch over just to environmental justice in general. Over the last 40 years or so, environmental justice has evolved into a rich and multifaceted framework for addressing environmental inequities, period. And although EJ now functions as a shorthand for the experience of environmental disparities, it actually encompasses several different things at once. You may be aware that EJ did emerge, of course, in the civil rights movement, but in fact, the EJ movement launched in Warren County, North Carolina in 1982. That's considered the birthplace of EJ. It's the reason it's considered the birthplace is because there was a protest against the siting of a hazardous waste landfill in a rural African-American community. And unfortunately, this demonstration failed to prevent the disposals of PCBs in their community, but it did spark a national conversation about systemic racism in environmental decision-making. So that's really important and exciting that it's in North Carolina. And second, EJ is also, a multidisciplinary field of study and practice. Several early studies conducted by the United Church of Christ, which is, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but it's there we go, right here. The United Church of Christ is this portion of the middle frame of the slide, as well as, the United Church of Christ, as well as the Government Accountability Office, demonstrated the existence of undue environmental burdens in minoritized communities. This work necessitates research and practical approaches that engage the human dimensions of environmental issues and recognizing the intersectional and systemic analysis that connects local and lived experiences to social structures like public health, access to services such as food banks and daycare, and proximity to green spaces are all relevant EJ issues. And of course, at the heart of EJ is a focus on how environmental decisions at various scales are made. Thus, of course, EJ refers to a policy process. The first environmental justice executive order came about in 1994. And as of now, all 50 states and DC now have some kind of EJ-focused law policy program on the books. And the EPA also has a dedicated Office of Environmental Justice. Progress across all these programs has been slow and uneven, but that progress does point to momentum in the effort to address environmental inequities. You can see a tiny little Bill Clinton in the middle of that far right square. And so keeping that history in mind, we focused in on one of recognized, core principles of EJ. The first being representation, right? We want to be sure that impacted communities are represented in the decision-making process. And equally as important, that process within itself. We want to ensure that planning processes and decision-making processes are fair, transparent, accessible, and provide opportunities for impacted communities to participate within them. And then last, but certainly not least, distribution. We want to ensure that environmental benefits and impacts are distributed equitably and or are mitigated so that no one community bears a disproportionate burden. So we're keeping that in mind as we kind of get into this environmental justice study. Excuse me. So with those guiding principles in mind, EJ significantly changes how we do sustainability in kind of three overlapping ways. The first, with its emphasis on the human dimensions of our world. EJ necessarily relocates where we think the environment or nature is. The traditional environmental movement and old school sustainability typically emphasizes the big N nature, right? Those pristine, beautiful, non-human ecosystems, such as the picture that's at the top of the far left box of this screen. And such a frame not only excludes those who do not have access to those pristine places, but also are lived in spaces. Early EJ activists focused on local communities at the neighborhood level, hence the slogan where we live, work, play, learn, and eat. So if we consider our neighborhood, even our homes or our bodies as our lived environment, that opens up an expanded range of environmental issues. Traditional sustainability focuses on the conservation of natural resources and preservation for future generations, which is all well and good. But EJ challenges us to consider non-normative environmental issues such as food access, asthma, drinking water, like we saw back in Flint, Michigan a few years back, and to take an intersectional systemic perspective. And plastic waste reduction is a good example of this. Statistics consistently show that Black and Brown communities prefer bottled drinking water. If the issue is framed as environmental illiteracy, interventions will focus on individual actions like reusable bottles or recycling. From an EJ perspective, this issue points to race-based disparities in the provision of clean tap water and distrust in public water systems. And finally, EJ's focus on representation and participatory decision-making defines who counts as sustainability stakeholders. Mainstream environmentalism is now grappling with the harsh reality of historical race and class-based discrimination perpetuated by figures like John Muir, Gifford Pinchot. The so-called Big 10 groups do important work. We know that. We all in this room know that. But they still have and still can marginalize the voices of those directly impacted by environmental disparities. By focusing on the lived experience of our local community members, we can not only get a better understanding of what's happening on the ground, but also bring diverse perspectives into the decision-making process, both for the county and for all. And so keeping the history in mind, those principles in mind, I know I'm going through a lot of history, I'm trying to be fast. We did develop a definition of environmental justice. Now, I do want to say this definition is specific to the county. This is not like the end-all be-all definition OEJ. We developed it for county function. So the county commits to embrace justice through meaningful involvement and equal protection, as well as enforcement of environmental laws and regulations to align to the county's equity action plan to address unfair exposure of Black and Brown and other marginalized communities to environmental harms, which have negative impacts on health outcomes, which is great, but it took a long time to write, to be honest with you. So getting into the study and the action plan. So we are in the process of conducting an environmental justice study. I know this is kind of a fun graphic. Our first kind of pinkish, I want to say that's pink, that quantitative analysis bubble. So we are in the quantitative analysis phase now. We've completed the quantitative data analysis, which I'm going to get into momentarily. The qualitative data collection is what we've started right now. So we started our first outreach session in September, and the purpose there is to populate that quantitative data. The quantitative data is great, but it's just that, it's hard data. We need to understand the why and the so what about that data. We can only get that through public input. So the quantitative data combined with the qualitative data, along with some internal nuances we'll get into momentarily, will populate and inform our final environmental justice study. We anticipate that study being completed by the end of the calendar 2022. And then over the course of the first 6 months of 2023, county staff with input from the external community will draft our environmental justice action plan. So let's get into the quantitative report, shall we? So we have hired a consultant. They're called Hummingbird. Their logo is at the bottom underneath that picture of right behind the government building. Excuse me, they've completed a comprehensive quantitative analysis using GIS to analyze the distribution of various geographic, socioeconomic, health, and environmental factors across Mecklenburg County. They've overlaid over 100 GIS data layers, creating a robust geodatabase that allows us to drill down to the census block level within county commission districts. And so we knew that we needed to answer our research questions about cumulative impacts. And so the consultants worked with us to derive 3 aggregate indices. The first being overburden quality of life indicators. This connects socioeconomic variables and health conditions. The second being access to services and community resources. And this overlays variables related to community level services like bike lanes, transportation, daycare, food pantries, and parks. And last but definitely not least, are environmental burdens. So those account for various pollution sources and other environmental indicators. You can see how the study draws on the principles of EJ that we talked about in the previous slides, which helps us understand the connections between social and environmental stressors, as well as the distribution of benefits and impacts across our county. And so keeping that in mind, we also, the analysis thus far includes a racial equity lens to evaluate cumulative impacts, meaning all 3 of the indices I just talked about were analyzed with respect to the geographic distribution of brown and Black populations across the county. So as noted, we drilled down to the census block level, and Hummingbird, our consultant, developed a map combining brown and Black populations, which are composed of BIPOC communities, for comparisons within and across those indices. So as you can see, we're a very diverse county with Black and brown communities represented in nearly half of our census blocks. We also see how Black and brown communities are concentrated in particular areas of the county. So if you can't see the little legend in the bottom right corner, I think that's right, blue versus beige portions of the map. So the blue areas of the map are more diverse areas, whereas the beige areas are not as diverse. Importantly, but frankly, unsurprisingly, all 3 of the aggregate indices that overburden quality of life, access to services, and environmental burdens indicate higher impacts within our BIPOC communities. And so we have been assessing this data by BOCC district, and that's been intentional. One of the reasons for that is to, 1, ensure that our commissioners really understand what we're doing, and drilling down to that level helps them empower their own residents and really kind of get their, forgive the phrase, hands dirty with what we're trying to really accomplish. And so that's been really successful. And I also just wanted to share how the districts are laid out, just because I'm going to reference them in future slides. So let's dive into the quantitative findings. So first, this is a map of the locations of community resources. And you can see locations of things such as food pantries, parks and trails, and community assets that are important for quality of life. You'll see in the middle of the map is the most concentrated area of those services. That's not surprising, but you will see as we kind of fan out in the county, there's a less distribution of those services. That could be related to income levels. We're still analyzing that. Going into our next slide. So this is our social vulnerability index. This captures several factors related to community level stressors, such as poverty, housing, and employment. And while this index was created and is used by the CDC for disaster planning and risk management, it's useful to us in our study because it gives us a picture of differential impacts of environmental factors, as well as the built environment and socioeconomic variables. So it almost overlays a lot of that data that we've been collecting in a really condensed, easy to define way. Something I didn't mention. So the weird white census blocks that are like devoid of color, the one in District 2 is the airport, and the one down here in District 6 is, it's like a big compilation of industry where people physically don't live. So there's no population to report in those 2 census blocks. Our next and final slide I'm going to show, that's a map, is our stormwater infrastructure projects. This is a fascinating slide to me because I thought that going into this, we would see a really dense area of stormwater infrastructure up toward the top of the county just because of flooding and what have you. This is really interesting because it shows us, I think, 1, that there's a lot of stormwater issues in the county, which we all know, but also it points to perhaps a systemic issue of poor planning when it comes to, I'm not going to say county projects, when it comes to projects in general, not taking stormwater needs and resources into account when we're talking about the impacts to our overall river systems and just stormwater overflow system. So I think this is fascinating. I think it's all fascinating, to be honest with you. Okay, so as I mentioned, we've finished the quantitative data collection part of the portion of the plan of the study. We're in the qualitative data collection phase now. So the third pillar of the environmental justice action plan is very much related to the previous slide. The consultant is also looking at our stormwater capital improvement process. And so really that's how we select projects, how we select properties we're going to acquire, et cetera. When it comes to stormwater, they're examining that process through a racial equity and environmental justice lens. Meaning, how do we apply principles of EJ and racial equity into property acquisition, project selection, project management? And I think that while I recognize we recognize, I'm going to say that process seems to be a bit self-serving. I believe in the long run, from a county perspective, I believe in the long run that can have a ton of impact, because the intent there is, as we roll out those recommendations, we're going to implement those, we hope, versions of those recommendations in various CIPs throughout the county. There's about 6 in various departments. As I mentioned, we will finish our engagement process and all of our pieces of the study will be completed by the end of the calendar year, end of 2022, and then we'll begin writing the plan itself in early 2023. This is a very bright slide, but I like it more than the other slide that I had before. So I thought I should, and it's kind of late in the day, so that I throw this in there too. This is our outreach schedule for all of our sessions for EJ. We have completed those first 2 in September, and these are organized. They're color coded by a commissioner district, which, if you know your district, good on you. Our next one is happening at Eastway in October. We are in the process of adding 2 more for District 4. That's an east part of the county, just because we need more representation there. And so to summarize, the quantitative and qualitative analysis, along with our stormwater CIP analysis, will complete our environmental justice study. And like I mentioned, we anticipate the study being completed in late December, early January. And so moving into 2023, calendar 2023, sustainability staff, so county staff, along with equity and inclusion county staff, will work together about the last 2 quarters of FY23, so January through June 2023, to develop the environmental justice action plan. That plan, and the reason for that, I do have a little bit of time. The reason for that we're not asking the consultant to draft the plan, and this is no shade to consultants. I think consultants do fantastic work, but at times, and just in my experience, boilerplate plans are a thing that happen, especially when you're talking about big government projects and contracts. And with this plan, it's, in our opinion, so important and so impactful that we want to ensure that it's done correctly in a measurable way. So the staff, we are going to work to develop timelines, budget recommendations, and an actual implementation plan that will comprise that environmental justice action plan. We plan to present the plan to the Environmental Stewardship Committee. That's our own internal. It's not internal. It's a public facing committee, but it's our governing body for our environmental leadership action plan. We anticipate presenting our plan, EJAP plan, to them in May 2023, to the overarching board for hopeful adoption in June 2023. And with that, I'm going to stop talking and stop sharing. Talked really fast. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Erin. And those maps are so powerful in showing the disproportionate impacts, burdens, access to resource across Mecklenburg County. So thank you for the work that you're doing. So now I'd like to, if Alina can bring the slides back up, I'm going to introduce our next 2 speakers. All right, so Daisha Williams is the Environmental Justice Manager with Clean Air in North Carolina, and Ronald Ross on the next slide. Ronald Ross is with the Northwood Estate Community Organization and Historic West End Green District. Both Daisha and Ron are very passionate environmental advocates, and we're so excited that they are partnering with us tonight to share more about the work that's being done on the ground. So what does environmental justice look like in action as we fight for cleaner air? So Daisha and Ron, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Meg. I'm just going to share my screen here. Is it good? Awesome. So yeah, we really appreciate the opportunity to speak today. about how we are collaborating together. So Clean Air in the historic West End neighborhood with goals to implement green infrastructure, strategic tree planting, expanding EV access and EV charging stations, as well as community clean air awareness programs. So these efforts have the intention and will have the intention and continue to have the intention with the goal of contributing to improved air quality, better health outcomes, as well as reducing air pollution emissions in an area where residents have been impacted by environmental injustice, which we are going to get a little bit more into today. So I did want to start off with just a brief overview of CleanAIRE NC. So our organization is focused on two powerful determinants of health in North Carolina, which are climate change and air quality. And we work towards providing equitable and collaborative solutions towards addressing this with advocacy, education, and community-driven research through our various programs. So again, just to briefly go through some of them, we have a health program, which has medical advocates for healthy air, where we provide resources to help health professionals discuss climate change and air pollution with their patients. We're expanding this within EJ communities. We have our policy program, which advocates for the strengthening and enforcement of environmental policies and decisions that limit the factors contributing to the impact of air pollution and climate change, of course, in affected communities. And then our citizen science program, which utilizes education, air monitor deployment, to increase community capacity around air quality issues and translate that research into action. And then finally, my program of environmental justice essentially incorporates all of these efforts of the other programs to ensure that those who have been disproportionately suffering from environmental burdens are being included and empowered in decisions that impact their quality of life. So at the bottom, I included all of our program logos, and on various slides throughout this presentation, I have put the logo of the program that the effort pertains to. And this is just to highlight how all of our programs work holistically to address environmental justice, which is important because this is an all hands on deck thing that everyone needs to be working towards, not only within Clean Air, but within our regulatory agencies, our county agencies, et cetera. So just to focus a little bit on why we focus on air pollution, this will be a little daunting, but to put it plainly, clean air is essential to health. And when we are breathing in polluted air, it can either cause or exacerbate health outcomes. So in that way, air pollution truly is a global health crisis, and it's a public health crisis here in North Carolina. So just to illustrate this a little bit further, these are the 5 leading causes of death as of 2020, according to the CDC here in North Carolina. And as you can see, the 4 that are in bold are or have the potential to be caused or exacerbated by air pollution. And I just wanted to highlight that this is the latest data from the CDC, but I do want to note that in 2020, more people died than were born in 64 North Carolina counties. And we all know what happened in 2020, of course, COVID-19. It's definitely still a sore spot for our nation and nations across the world, but particularly for Black and Brown communities that were hit hardest by the virus. And in this way, COVID really highlighted a lot of inequities that Black and Brown communities face, especially in terms of air pollution. So just for example, the Harvard Center for Climate Health and the Global Environment determined that those who were exposed to even small amounts of air pollution over the long term are 11% more likely to die from COVID-19. And again, when we think about the communities who have been disproportionately impacted by the virus, which are Black and Brown communities, it definitely causes us to look at pollution from an environmental justice lens because these are also the same communities that are likely to be surrounded by sources of extreme pollution. But aside from COVID, many of the leading causes of death that you see here on this slide impact Black and Brown communities at a higher rate. So, for example, the Cleveland Clinic determined that Black men have a 70% higher risk of heart disease than white men. And according to the American Stroke Association, Black Americans have a higher prevalence of stroke and the highest death rate from stroke than any other racial group. And they cited stress, diabetes, and environmental exposure as some of the top reasons for that occurrence. So again, air pollution and environmental exposure, it's a public health crisis, and understanding the environmental justice implications of the mortality impacts of air pollution exposure is and should be a public health priority, as like I just highlighted, some populations may face a disproportionate health burden. So just to dive a little bit further in terms of the main pollutants of concern and what we're concerned about here at CleanAIRE NC. So both actually at CleanAIRE NC and at the state level, the pollutants that we are most concerned about are particulate matter and ground level ozone. There are 6 criteria air pollutants that the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality, as well as Mecklenburg County Air Quality, focus on. However, the NCDEQ has listed the 2 pollutants, these 2 pollutants as the biggest air quality problems in North Carolina. So just starting with particulate matter, or PM 2.5, there's also PM 10, and the 10 and 2.5 represents the size of the pollutant. So that's 2.5 or 10 microns in diameter or smaller. And this size is really important because it's especially harmful because the lungs can't remove those fine particles through normal processes such as coughing. So when PM 2.5 gets into our bodies, it can reach deep into our lungs. It causes inflammation, oxidative stress, imbalance of our nervous systems, and so much more. And then again, in terms of exposure, according to the American Lung Association, Black and brown communities breathe in 56% more than particulate matter, such as soot or smog, compared to their white counterparts. And again, given that Black and brown communities here in the Charlotte metro region are surrounded by highway systems and other sources of pollution, which we will get a little bit more into today, these communities are no stranger to this type of exposure. And this, of course, causes a host of health issues. So again, this is a really nasty pollutant, and due to its harmful nature, we work to equip citizens with the knowledge of how much they are breathing in and when through purple air monitors. Again, we're going to cover more of that later. So our air keepers take measurements, track, and help interpret the air quality that they're breathing in terms of particulate matter captured by those devices. And it also helps us to track if and when these disparities exist. So again, just to quickly touch upon ground level ozone as well, it's another major pollutant of concern. It's an odorless, colorless gas that's created by a chemical reaction when pollutants that come from things such as cars, power plants, and other sources come into contact with each other in the presence of heat and sunlight. Ground level ozone is also a regional concern since it's a pollutant. The pollutant and its precursors can be transported by wind, and it can also travel long distance, creating a regional issue. But like PM, it's very detrimental to our health. Breathing in ground level ozone can trigger a variety of health problems like chest pain, throat irritation, congestion. It can worsen bronchitis and asthma, and repeated exposure can permanently scar our lungs. So I'm sorry for all the scary air pollution facts, but these are the realities that communities are living with. And before I turn it over to Ron, I just wanted to highlight social determinants of health, which is complex interactions between social and economic factors, the physical environment, and individual behavior. So this is the notion that the social conditions which we face every day, so where we live, where we work and play, affect a wide range of health functioning and the quality of life outcomes and risks. So this is things such as economic stability, access to healthcare. At the beginning of the webinar, a few folks mentioned lack of access to healthy and fresh food. That is a social determinant of health. And then of course, there's also access to education or educational attainment, and of course our built-in environment. So are we located near sources of pollution? Are we located near major highway systems? And I just wanted to highlight this because social determinants of health play a huge factor in how communities experience pollution. So I know I've highlighted a lot about how Black and brown communities are exposed to high rates of pollution. However, even if a low income or BIPOC community is experiencing the same level of pollution as a wealthy white community, the outcomes will be different because of social determinants of health, because one community has the resources to address it and one doesn't. And this is exactly why air pollution is an environmental justice issue. So with that, I'll just pass it on to Ron.
Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us in this presentation. Environmental justice means that no group of people should bear a disproportionate share of negative environmental effects that result from operations or policies pursued by commerce, industry, or government. If you take a look at the map just to the right, it shows the interstates and roadways that cut through the historic West End. The red and yellow shadings represents areas of the city where redlining was done, limiting public and private investment, and affected property values and land values, and also individuals that lived in those communities. They were limited to resources in order to repair and upfit their residence as well. And then the green area to the south, which is South Charlotte, is a more affluent part of the city. And if you take a look at there's two orange squares. There's one sort of to the left there and to the right. These represent two EPA monitors that are in the city that monitor fine particle pollution, which Daisha described to you earlier. And the circles represent facilities that pollute the air. It could even be from a gas station that emits volatile organic compounds every time someone puts gas in their car, or it could be from an industrial source of pollution. So the issue of environmental justice arises when certain communities, through no fault of their own, are more impacted than others by the sources of pollution located near where they live, work, and play. Next slide. Okay, if we can take a look at this, is some of the challenges that we face in the historic West End communities. To the left, there's a 1935 redlining disinvestment map, which was designed by the Federal Home Loan Owners Loan Corporation. Again, it shows areas in red and yellow where financial institutions did not make home loans or other kinds of community investments for decades. And of course, and unfortunately, this is something that's predominant in Black communities, in the community that I live in. And again, the next map here represents the location of, or the identifying an area that was designated a public health priority area. Again, these are determined by, again, social determinants. And as you see, the darker areas represent an area that is comprised mainly of Black and brown individuals, and they're located in what is called the Crescent area of Charlotte. And the next map again shows what continues today, economic segregation. Again, the darker areas, which represents the crescent, reflect communities that are populated by Black and brown individuals. The lighter areas, again, South Charlotte, which is the wedge, are the more affluent communities.
So just to illustrate this a little bit further, this map was pulled from the Environmental Protection Agency's Environmental Justice Screening and Mapping tool, which is a tool I use a lot in my work. And it shows Black and brown communities here in the Charlotte metro region shaded in orange and red, again, which is primarily made up of the crescent and those formerly redlined communities. And then the blue dots show facilities which emit air pollution and toxic releases according to the EPA. So this just shows the historic West End and Black and brown communities in this region have a higher concentration of those either factories, waste sites, and other emitters that emit either toxic releases or air pollution. And as you can see, they are concentrated in those Black and brown communities.
Okay, as we kind of take a look back, just to give you a little reference here. During the 1960s, there was something that I call urban Negro renewal that brought about a freeway system, brought in I-77, Brookshire Freeway, North Carolina Highway 16, and those just went directly through Black communities. The residents in those areas had to relocate to other areas of Charlotte. There were a lot of individuals that I went to elementary school with during that time. I have not heard from them since, have not seen them since. So family ties were disconnected through that process. And what happened with the intentionality of these racist practices, this resulted in a high concentration of industrial facilities, a lot of truck and vehicular traffic, trains, that gave rise to residents being exposed excessively to air pollution and resulted in related health issues that are far too common in my community. And just to highlight a couple of areas that bring about a lot of concern to the residents in our community. I'll start at the bottom here. This is a photograph of construction during the expansion of the I-77 toll road. And this is in close proximity to the intersection of I-77 to I-277 exchange, and the overpass is Oaklawn Avenue. So this is what those residents that lived close to that construction, they were exposed to it on a daily basis for over 2 years, 2-3 years, until this process was completed. They have now installed a barrier wall, so they're looking at a wall, which is not very conducive to wake up to look at, and then you're still being exposed to the vehicular emissions, as well as what they were exposed to before, along with the construction equipment. And again, these are all in proximity, close proximity to one another. The middle photograph is a picture of, the middle one to the right is a photograph off of Statesville Avenue of a facility, a recycling facility that's visible daily, on a daily basis right now. So these are some industrial facilities that we're looking at to try to see if we can get some changes implemented to reduce our community's exposure to these elements. And if I go to the left of this facility, these are 2 trucks entering and exiting Martin Marietta Rock Quarry that's located on Beatty's Ford Road, not far from my community. And again, you see how much growth is taking place in the city of Charlotte. And this is one of the main facilities that distributes the rock that's used to pour the concrete, to make the concrete, to build the buildings that's going in Charlotte. And they traverse in and out and through our communities on a daily basis. And the top photograph is a photograph of the actual rock quarry. I call it Star Wars. It looks like a Star Wars presentation, but this is real life situation. And so that is a facility that's in close proximity to our community. And again, we are overly exposed to the pollution that's emitted, the dust and so forth from this facility. And we have started conversations with them as far as ways to limit pollution exposure, dust, the rock. Again, they have explosions and so forth because they have to blow up the rock as well. So those are noise barriers and so forth. So again, we hope to and need to utilize means to have discussion with them to reduce these pollutants being exposed to our communities and negatively impacting us. Okay, understanding and addressing challenges through community monitoring. In conjunction with CleanAIRE NC, myself and several other community leaders within the historic West End started monitoring air quality in the community, utilizing some of these devices. We have an air beam to the right top. The one below that is a purple air monitor, which we are expanding location of those within the neighborhoods. Those are air quality monitors, again, detecting particulate matter 2.5 that are located on the exterior of homes. And when we, the picture to the left here showing Maddie Marshall and some staff of the of CleanAIRE NC is a hand monitor there as well. So we're utilizing all types of equipment to take a look at what's happening in our communities with the exposure of the pollutants in our community.
And then this slide just displays some of the monitors that we have in the historic West End community across six historic West End neighborhoods. So the dots you see here on this map just represent monitors at residents' homes and where they're located, followed by the AQI limit or the air quality index, which essentially just tells you how healthy or unhealthy the air is that you're breathing. So we are continuously deploying these across the historic West End neighborhood. I should have mentioned this about particulate matter, but it varies very much. So it could even vary from street to street. And you can even see this reflected in some of the monitors here. So you have one, that says 55, followed by one, maybe just 2-3 minutes down the street that displays a 75. So the particulate matter levels vary, and so we're working to implement a cluster network of particulate matter monitors within the historic West End to get a better idea of not only disparities within the historic West End, maybe compared to other areas of Charlotte, but even within the neighborhoods themselves. But we're doing a lot more than just monitoring. There's a lot of advocacy that goes behind this monitoring.
And as a result of our monitoring the air quality, we were able to come up with a report back in 2008, Clearing the Air, Charlotte's Historic West End. Again, we took a comparison look at air quality, of course, in our communities and compared it with other communities in South Charlotte, in Dilworth area, Myers Park area. Again, as was alluded to earlier, there were some similarities, but again, it varies again just by where you live and work, and the exposures that are within that community. We had, if you all can remember, I don't know if most of you were here or not, but when we had fires back on the East Coast of North Carolina, all of the smoke and pollution from those fires drifted into Charlotte, and our air quality was just as bad as if we were right there on the coast with those fires and experiencing that. And so as a result of this, we did presentations with the county commissioners, Charlotte Mecklenburg Air Quality, and also the county had established an environmental stewardship commission. We attended the board meetings as well, and we presented the idea that, well, can we get at least an air quality monitor on our side of town? And so the Air Quality Commission took that to the board, and we came back and we were able to get an EPA monitor that is currently working. It was installed back in first part of 2020. And the community leaders, with the assistance of the Air Quality Commission, chose the site that's located behind Friendship Missionary Baptist Church, which is off Beatties Ford Road. There's a Friendship Sportsplex that is located there, which is running. It's up and running right now. And just for information, probably mentioned later on, but we'll be having an open house on the 15th of October. So please feel free to come at that time from 9 to 11 and get some information. Air Quality Commission will be there. Clean Air will be there, and Historic West End Green District will be there as well.
Yeah, and so I just wanted to note that this was really the beginning of the Historic West End Green District, because while monitoring, of course, is important, we were able to advocate for, this federal air monitor. So monitoring is very important, but data collection doesn't necessarily mitigate the impacts of air pollution. So moving forward, that's why we're focused a little bit more on solutions through the Historic West End Green District. So Ron, if you want to kind of go through our main goals. We have 3 main goals of the West End, the Historic West End Green District.
Okay, and again, as an offshoot of our findings and so forth, we felt that it would be very instrumental in us to create a Historic West End Green District. And again, we're looking at improving the tree canopy, green infrastructure along the corridor. We hope to be able to get businesses involved in getting green roofs installed, green walls, and all types of green infrastructure, being on the bus stops and so forth. And we're also looking forward to mitigating and reducing health and pollution impacts. We have some current projects going on right now. There's a Wells Fargo ATM that's located on Beatties Ford Road that we're hopefully within the month or so we'll be implementing a garden in that facility. We are working with Charlotte, tree adoption. We also have been approved for a placemaking project through the city of Charlotte, where we're going to be greening some pillars that have the Historic West End logo on it. We're calling it living pillars. We're going to put vegetation on it, and we're going to continue monitoring around various areas within the community. And we are also looking towards, which we've already begun, setting the infrastructure, implementing infrastructure for electric charging stations. We would like to see more walking, biking, and clean transit throughout our community. We currently have, which is pictured here at the Ritz at Washington Heights Park, where we have a prototype charging station. It's called a pole vault. And the difference in that is that telephone pole that's just to the left of it, it is attached to that pole, and that's where it gets all of its electricity from. That was in conjunction with Duke Power, UNC Charlotte, Coalition of Carolinas as well. This was the grand opening of that facility. It's up and running and available to charge vehicles. Okay, and also, again, we got the pole vault. We've had EV ride and drive event. And again, we're looking at other locations to implement charging stations. The library, the Vest Water Plant is earmarked for location of library, of a charging station. And we have just recently, last week, one of the businesses on Beatties Ford and LaSalle has installed another EV charging station.
Yeah, and we thank our partners at GoStation for helping us to implement that. And we're also partnering with them on our other deployment sites. So thank you to GoStation for that.
And again, we are actively engaged in getting our communities educated about air quality, the need to take efforts to reduce it and to be aware when air quality is bad. And we've held advocacy training sessions in July. We're currently involved in the Healthy Air Education Series. We are in the second one that we're going to have this coming Saturday. And we've got very good response from our community for participation in those events. And we're looking forward to continue and increase engagement with the city, the county, and other partnerships that are available to participate with us in advancing our goal of reducing pollution and the negative impacts of that in our community.
Yeah, and we've had 86 registrants for the Healthy Education Series. So it's been really awesome to have the community behind us and to, continue these educational efforts and just have the constant communication and just, it's just really, really awesome to see the interest in all of this. So just kind of closing us out, we've learned a lot along the way about what's important to you community members and how we can increase our engagement and further move forward to help increase advocacy, educational efforts, and everything that we're working on. So I just wanted to highlight some of these very quickly. So we have now Ask Me Anything quarterly events where not only airkeepers in the historic West End, but our airkeepers across the state can come in, ask questions about their monitor, ask questions about the data, any type of questions that they have. Our next one, we will actually be joined by the founder of Purple Air to answer some of those community questions. So we're really excited for that. We've also created a community level emissions reporting form. And this was actually a suggestion that came out of our recent advocacy training from community members in July. So our goal here is to better build data integrity behind some of the data that we're collecting, because particulate matter, it comes from so many sources. If a monitor is spiking, it could be from, a source of air pollution, or it could be from someone smoking outside of the monitor or lighting a candle or something of that nature. So being able to connect community experience to the data, we are hoping will really help to increase that data integrity piece. We're also moving forward, going to really focus on report backs. So this is just an example from a recent one that we did. But just, tracking some of the data that we're collecting and regularly engaging residents in that data. So here we just have a graph from monitors in Washington Heights, Oakland Park, off of North Hoskins. And we didn't mention this, but we put a Purple Air monitor on the EV charging station at the Ritz at Washington Heights. So that's the data from this one as well. And then this green line just shows the EPA's air quality index good limit. So yeah, we're just hoping to send more of these out. With the graph, it'll, include some more data on what your monitor is collecting, when were the high sources, of exposure that we saw, et cetera, things of that nature. And then, like I mentioned, cluster networks. We would really like to implement more Purple Air monitors within environmental justice communities, starting with the historic West End, so we can, again, have a better idea of how pollution even varies from street to street. And I know we did have a question about how we can address environmental justice. So I guess Ron will kind of go through that now, and then we can follow up with the rest of the questions, and we'll try to get through this quickly.
Okay, real quickly here. These are our recommendations. We would like to see genuine, and I didn't mean wine, but okay. Genuine intentional engagement with impacted communities, advance notice for engagement opportunities to the community, door-to-door engagement, inclusive and applicable for all ages, county and governmental representatives directly engaged within neighborhoods and community leadership, building up community confidence and resilience, see more economic opportunities, transportation accessibility, increased climate change, heat resilience, green infrastructure, trees, bus stop shelters, and so forth. I'd like to see resiliency hubs established within the communities, engage local environmental groups, and engagement by the county with local environmental groups and county entities, interagency county collaboration on EJ issues, air, water, land, recreation, and so forth. Constant education and communication among county entities to ensure they are proper advocates. We'd like to see clean construction and development. There's a program called GRADE. We'd like to see that expanded within communities that are overburdened by pollution. Again, this is a program that's available to try to get aged diesel equipment replaced, grants to replace aging diesel equipment is the acronym for it. Okay, and we'd like to see additional aid and due to the allocation of federal and state environmental justice funding to overburdened communities, ensure communities are aware and able to acquire opportunities, and offer additional educational programming and materials around this available funding.
Absolutely. And then just closing us out, I just wanted to highlight some events we have. So the second session of the Healthy Education Series will be this Saturday from 11 a.m. to 12:30. The same day, we are also doing a tree adoption event with Trees Charlotte from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. They'll have 200 trees available for adoption for Historic West End community members if any of us are on the call today. And then finally, as Ron mentioned, we will be having an open house at that EPA Federal Air Monitor on Saturday, October 15th from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. We would love to see you guys out there, engage more with us, learn about what we're doing, and seeing some of, I guess, the fruits of our labor and some of the advocacy that the community has done to get this monitor there. So I just wanted to end with our contact and a huge thank you for your time and for your ears tonight.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ron and Daisha. It's so incredibly compelling to hear the story of how the construction of interstates, the building and current operations of industrial and polluting sources is so unequal across Mecklenburg County. And when that's overlaid with demographic factors like income, health disparities, educational level, that really disproportionately affects Black and Brown communities. So thank you for telling that story so well as for making so many really powerful recommendations for how we can do better. So before we take some questions from our audience, I just want to give each of our speakers an opportunity to kind of share your final thoughts on what is your greatest hope for the future of Mecklenburg County when this environmental justice action plan is implemented? What will the county look like when that plan is realized? And then what do you see as a major challenge to implementing the plan? And what would you encourage people who are attending this event to do? So you don't have to answer all of those, but just sort of share any final thoughts that you'd like to leave us with. And you can just do this as you feel called and unmute yourself.
Ladies first.
Okay. So I'll just say, I think the biggest challenge is going to be to reverse the historical impact, segregation, redlining that have really exacerbated and caused a lot of these environmental injustices. And to remedy that, we really need to prioritize this and continue to advocate for EJ in every single policy, action, program, general efforts, et cetera. I had highlighted at the beginning of the presentation that, at Clean Air, we really try to take a holistic approach to how we address environmental justice. And I do think that all entities should take that approach. I know I'm coming from the airspace, but I actually used to work on EJ issues in the stormwater space in the historic West End community, where I saw and tracked the same exact outcomes in terms of disproportionate exposure. And I just mentioned this because it's systemic, it's integrated at all levels. It's not just one or two or three impacts, it's cumulative, it's all of the impacts, it's economic, it's everything. And so such impacts, they represent the reality of living in burdened communities where these socioeconomic, environmental, and health factors combine to create these negative effects. So, it's not just addressing one thing or the other, it's about looking at it holistically. And I feel like through integrating environmental justice at all levels, and specifically with the county making it an interagency approach, all of these cumulative impacts will start to be addressed, through the decline in emissions, through better socioeconomic outcomes, better access to trees, better access to health resources, all of these things. And I think then when we start addressing it holistically, we'll start to see improvements within our communities.
Thanks, Daisha.
Sorry, I froze for a second. Beautifully put, Daisha. I could not agree with you more. I agree 1,000% with what Daisha just lined out. I think the biggest hurdle is that very thing, that cumulative impacts, and addressing it at every level. What I'm most excited about is doing just that, because that's the hard work, right? Addressing the historic inequities, the historic displacement at every level of county planning that we can. And I'm really excited about that. I also recognize that government wheels turn very, very slowly. And so it's going to take time. And I have to balance that personally, right? Because I know that we need to make change right now, but it's going to take time. And so I guess I'm hopeful for that, and also think it's going to be a big hurdle to answer two questions.
Well, I would like to take a look at, I'll start with the first question. What would it look like? Hopefully, and I'm really more grassroots, kind of, that's, where it starts. More residents working together. There would be resulting more confidence with county, city government. And of course, ultimate goal to see more equitable distribution of services. And we're wanting to achieve a cleaner environment, better accessibility of resources, employment, transportation, wealth, health, food, housing, and all of the those amenities, I'll put it that way. So again, that would be the hopeful goal, and also we'd see a more widespread of opportunities for those that are disadvantaged and have been overburdened by pollution, and communities have been underinvested as well. And the big challenge that I see, and I, every session I go to, I try to say there's not enough collaboration from our elected officials down to the people that are experiencing and living the hardships that they have to. They've got to do better. They've got to do better than just wanting to talk to us at the time that they need a vote, that they need to get in office. A lot of them don't have that communication throughout their term, having open meetings and that type of thing. It's always the community trying to track them down and find out can you do this? Can you do that? And so they need to get out and knock on the doors, not just when it's time to receive a vote to get into the office. We live in the community. We got you in office. We need you to express our voice about what we would like done, what we're experiencing, what we are lacking. So just in generality, those are the things that I see. And again, we just need to give our community that voice. And I think we can get a lot done together if we are all engaged. And then I just want to say one thing about this process. I don't know if you have any of the residents, again, people that are involved in EJ within the communities that have been involved in the conversations prior to this being rolled out. Some of the data, I really would like to see some of the data that, Hummingbird gathered. Is that realistic? Is that really what transpired? Or is that really what the community wants? Surveys that more ask the question about what would you like to see in your community versus I work on a job selling shoes, or those simple type questions. Those questions are fine. Our communities get inundated with a lot of surveys. You wouldn't believe it. Every session it's a survey, and it's the same questions. And I don't know, I'm not an expert survey maker. So it just seems like some of the questions are not really pertinent to what needs to be shared and found out. So.
Okay, thank you so much, Ron. And I just want to leave you with a challenge from Sustain Charlotte. Let's make sure that this plan does not sit on a shelf. The best plan in the world, if it sits in a binder on a shelf and does not actually guide policies and budgets, is just a paperweight. So we all have power as residents to be advocates for environmental justice. So please continue to engage your elected officials, talk to staff at these meetings, get involved with your neighbors, and let's advocate for environmental justice together. So we have about 10 minutes for answering some of the questions that you all have put either in the chat or the Q&A. So Eric Severl from Sustain Charlotte is going to share some of those questions, and any of our speakers can answer those.
Hey everybody. It's great being here with you guys tonight. I learned a lot from your presentations. I'll get us through the Q&A and try to get us out by 7:30. So I'm going to group some of the questions together. The first one deals with trees, and this is for Daisha and Ron to answer. It's pertaining to the goal 1, and one was a comment about how much money is needed to get goal 1 tree canopy to an acceptable level. How much money will it take to reach that goal? And the second one was related to that. Didn't see street trees on there as part of goal 1. Hope that is part of the plan, so we get more shade covering those sidewalks in the summer.
Yeah, so I guess just to address the first one first, we didn't cover this, but one of our goals is to add covers to bus shelters across the historic West End, whether that's green bus shelters or just covers in general, to help provide that shade, because we do believe that that's a really important piece, a part of this. In terms of just the fiscal, the number, I don't think we actually have like a solid number, but I will say that we have a garden going in at Wells Fargo. We have received funding from the city for these green pillars, and we have found that green infrastructure, gardens, street, it's expensive. It's a lot more expensive than you think. And the potential costs or the burdens, specifically, I guess, when it comes to tree canopy and cover, it's going to depend on a lot of factors. And climate change and vulnerability is a part of that because, you know, the price of water, you need a lot of water to maintain trees. We've already seen water supply demand increasing even within this year in other states. So, you know, North Carolina is not going to be a stranger to that, especially as climate change increases. So it's, you know, supply and demand is really going to impact the prices of those things. And also socio-demographic preferences, our built-in environment characteristics, and as well as maybe just fiscal capacity to maintain trees. So that's a really loaded answer, but we don't have a solid number, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But I will like to say, I feel like whatever that number is, I think the benefits will outweigh the costs in terms of the ecosystem services that trees provide, not only for our health, but, you know, for our mental health, for our physical health. So yeah, that is why that's a huge goal for this initiative.
Yeah, and if I just might add to that, again, we do have some assistance in that, you know, the city is you know, has tree canopy goals. Again, specific to our community, we didn't start with a very large tree canopy, so whatever is diminishing has a huge effect. And again, with the building that's going on throughout Charlotte, they are negating a lot of trees, and, you know, the developers aren't replacing tree for tree. So we have, you know, that to deal with. But again, those are our goals to increase that. And somewhat to what Daisha alluded to, again, maintenance of trees. A lot of our communities, which is, you know, prevalent throughout Charlotte as well, are older communities, and they have older trees. You got maintenance costs inherent on individual property owners for maintenance of those. Some of the trees are diseased, they need to be replaced or whatever, and so forth. And so those are some things that the city of Charlotte is looking at, some resources to assist individual homeowners with those processes as well.
Thank you, Ron and Daisha, for that. I don't want to leave Erin out. So there's a question here that I think all three of you could answer, but I'll let Erin go first. What work is being done with the city of Charlotte to further the county's work on environmental justice? And of course, you guys could ask as well, since they're not here, if you could speak for that collaboration, or if there is a collaboration.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll say that our office works very closely with the city, with our counterpart with the city, Sarah Hazel, Katie Riddle, Heather Bolick. I mean, we're interwoven with them consistently. I think that we, the county, have a unique opportunity in that the city has their CAP, Strategic Energy Action Plan, I think is what that stands for. And that was developed in a very intense way about 3 years ago, I think. And it's very specific, and that's how plans should be. The Environmental Leadership Action Plan, it's specific, but it's also relatively broad. And because it was developed in 2020 into 2021, there was a national conversation happening about justice and equity and those kinds of things. And so because the plan was developed when it was, we had this unique opportunity to include that, the environmental justice component within that plan. That doesn't really answer the question though, because I can't speak to what the city's doing as it relates to environmental justice. I know that they're very interested in our work, but I know that there's grassroots efforts happening within city counterparts.
In terms of what we're doing, because I do want to highlight not the city, but the county, because they have been a partner for us. So we mentioned our Clean Air Advocacy Training and Healthier Education series. The advocacy training was actually in part led by Mecklenburg County Air Quality. And then our Healthy Education series, we had Dr. Raynard Washington, who is the director of Mecklenburg County Public Health Department, who gave a presentation on what the county is doing to address environmental justice and air pollution. And I just thought that was really important because it's also important to connect residents with those county representatives, but also for those county representatives to be aware and on the ground with community members to, get that face-to-face interaction. So community members can directly, address their concerns with them. And we still have a lot of work to do. But I will say that it has been great to have the county's participation on that front.
And I'd just like to piggyback on Daisha as well. Again, the counties have been very instrumental in working with us. Again, they were definitely instrumental in us getting the air quality monitor. Definitely air quality staff has been excellent group of people to work with. Megan Green is super, besides her being a Charlotte High graduate as well, alumni with me as well. So of course she's younger than me, but and we have and we do work with the city, Sarah and Kate as well. They were instrumental in us getting the park there at the Ritz on Tate Street off of Beatty's-Ford Road, and combining resources to get the pole vault installed there. And we're working with them diligently to get charging stations installed at the Vest Water Plant that's on Beatty's-Ford Road as well. So we've been engaged with them. I know Sarah has engaged several community environmental justice groups in conversations during this past year as well. So we're looking for more from the county and the city as well, but we are definitely all engaged at this particular time.
Okay, thank you so much, Daisha, Ron, and Erin, for not only doing the very difficult work that you do with excellence, but for joining us tonight and sharing your expertise, your passion, and your vision. You're so critical to our community here in Mecklenburg County, and we're so honored to partner with you tonight. So just to close us out tonight, keep an eye on your email, the same address that you used to register for this event. Alina will be sending out a follow-up email by the end of this week that will include links to the various engagement opportunities that you heard about tonight. So please take a look at that and go to one of those sessions, take one of those actions, follow up with one of the CleanAIRE NC events. Find that one thing that you can do to have an impact on this plan and share it with the people that you know. So thank you so much for coming tonight, and we'll see you at one of our upcoming events. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Take care.